the guest that made Johnny Carson cry on air. For 30 years, Johnny Carson projected an image of unshakable composure. As host of The Tonight Show, he cultivated a persona defined by wry detachment, good-humored professionalism, and a certain emotional reserve that made him the perfect confidant for America's late-night viewing. Night after night, celebrity after celebrity, Carson maintained his characteristic poise, offering the perfect blend of attentiveness and restraint regardless of what unfolded before him. This carefully maintained composure made those rare moments when Carson's emotional guard dropped all the more powerful. In a television landscape increasingly defined by manufactured sentiment, Carson's tears were never strategic or performative. They were genuine, unexpected breaches in the armor of a man who prided himself on controlling his public image. Johnny considered visible emotion a form of unprofessionalism, revealed a longtime Tonight Show producer who worked closely with Carson for over a decade. He came from that Midwestern tradition where men didn't show vulnerability. When something moved him to tears on air, it wasn't just touching, it was a genuine glimpse behind the curtain of someone who worked very hard to maintain his composure. Today, we're exploring the 7 remarkable moments when television's most controlled personality found himself overcome by emotion, when the perfect professional facade cracked to reveal the deeply feeling man beneath. These rare instances, captured on camera despite Carson's best efforts to maintain his composure, offer a unique window into the true character of the man who shaped late-night television for generations. But first, we need to understand why our first entry had such extraordinary emotional impact, a moment so genuine and unexpected that it has become one of the most replayed segments in television history, revealing the depth of feeling behind Carson's carefully maintained reserve.
There are nights when I think I feel him climb upon her bed.
Number 1, Jimmy Stewart, Bo, the Dog Poem, 1981. Jimmy Stewart was already an American institution when he appeared on The Tonight Show in 1981. The legendary actor, known for classics like It's a Wonderful Life and Vertigo, had been a frequent and beloved guest throughout Carson's tenure. Their rapport was warm and genuine, built on mutual respect and shared Midwestern roots. But no one, least of all Carson himself, expected this particular appearance to create one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the program's history. Johnny had no advance warning about what Jimmy was planning to share, recalled a segment producer who worked on the show that night. We knew Stewart wanted to read something he'd written, but the content wasn't disclosed during pre-interviews. If Johnny had known, he might have prepared himself emotionally, but he was caught completely off guard. The segment began conventionally enough, with Carson and Stewart engaged in their usual warm conversation. Then, almost casually, Stewart mentioned he had written a poem about his golden retriever, Bo, who had recently passed away. When Carson invited him to share it, no one anticipated the emotional impact that would follow. Stewart, with his characteristic gentle hesitancy, began to read. The poem described his relationship with Bo, the dog's habits, their nightly routine, and ultimately the profound emptiness Stewart felt after Bo's death. As Stewart's voice grew increasingly emotional during the reading, cameras caught something remarkable. Johnny Carson, television's master of composure, wiping tears from his eyes. "You could have heard a pin drop in the studio," remembered a camera operator who was present that night. Stewart's delivery was so raw and genuine, and then we all noticed Johnny's reaction. He was trying to hide it, dabbing at his eyes quickly, looking down, but there was no mistaking it. Carson was crying on national television. What made the moment particularly powerful was Carson's visible internal struggle. He clearly hadn't expected to be so moved, and viewers watched in real time as he battled between his professional instinct to maintain composure and his genuine emotional response to Stewart's heartfelt words. Johnny was a dog lover himself, explained a longtime friend of Carson's who was backstage that night, but it wasn't just about the subject matter. It was watching Jimmy Stewart, this icon of American dignity and strength, allowing himself to be vulnerable. Johnny later told me that Stewart's willingness to share such raw emotion gave him permission to respond authentically. When Stewart finished reading, Carson attempted to transition to a commercial break, but his voice audibly cracked as he spoke. It was a moment of genuine humanity from a man who rarely allowed such glimpses into his emotional life, and the audience response was immediate and powerful. "The switchboard lit up after that segment aired," recalled an NBC executive. "We received thousands of calls and letters in the following days. People weren't just moved by Stewart's poem, They were touched by seeing Johnny's guard come down. Many viewers said it was the first time they'd ever seen him as a real person rather than a television host. The segment has since become one of the most replayed moments in Tonight Show history, regularly appearing in compilations of Carson's most memorable interviews. Its power lies not just in Stewart's moving tribute to his beloved pet, but in the rare glimpse it offered into the genuine emotional life of a man who had built his career on controlled affability. As Carson himself would later acknowledge to close friends, Jimmy Stewart got me that night, completely blindsided me. Some things just go straight to your heart, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Anxious to close.
Number 2, Bette Midler, Carson's final week, 1992. After nearly 30 years and over 4,500 episodes, Johnny Carson's tenure as host of The Tonight Show was drawing to a close in May 1992. His final week of broadcasts had been carefully planned as a fitting capstone to television's longest-running and most successful late-night program. What hadn't been planned, what couldn't have been orchestrated, was the emotional moment that would occur during Bette Midler's appearance on his penultimate show. There was already a heightened emotional atmosphere that entire week, explained a director who worked on Carson's final episodes. Everyone, the crew, the staff, the audience, felt the weight of television history happening. Johnny was maintaining his usual professional demeanor, but you could sense he was processing the enormity of saying goodbye to a show that had defined his life for 3 decades. Midler, already known for her powerful performances and larger-than-life persona, had been booked as one of Carson's final guests. The segment began with the typical interview format, but toward the end, Midler announced she wanted to sing a song for Carson. As the band began playing One for My Baby and One More for the Road, the atmosphere in the studio immediately shifted. The song choice was perfect, a saloon song about last calls and goodbyes, recalled a musical director who was present that night. But what made it extraordinary was how Bette transformed it from a performance into a genuine farewell. She wasn't singing to the audience, she was singing directly to Johnny, and you could see it register on his face the moment he realized this wasn't just entertainment, it was a personal goodbye. As Midler's powerful voice filled the studio with the melancholy farewell tune, cameras caught Carson's expression changing. The professional mask slipped, revealing a man visibly moved by this musical acknowledgement of his imminent departure. He looked away from the camera several times, clearly struggling to maintain composure. Johnny was fighting it hard, remembered a camera operator who was focused on Carson during the performance. You could see him swallowing repeatedly, blinking more than usual, all those little tells of someone working not to cry on camera. But by the end, he was losing that battle. When she finished the song and moved toward him, his eyes were unmistakably wet. The moment culminated with Midler and Carson sharing an embrace that communicated more than words could have. When Carson attempted to deliver his closing remarks for the segment, his voice noticeably choked up, another rare crack in the composed facade he had maintained for thousands of broadcasts. That wasn't just Johnny being moved by a beautiful performance, noted a producer who had worked with Carson for over a decade. That was a man confronting the end of the most significant chapter of his life. Bette gave him the gift of acknowledging the emotional weight of that moment, something Johnny himself would have been too reserved to articulate. The segment became instantly iconic, replayed countless times in the years since, as the emotional high point of Carson's farewell week. Its power lies in its authenticity, a genuine moment of vulnerability from television's most controlled personality, captured during one of the most significant transitions in broadcasting history. In a medium increasingly defined by manufactured sentiment, Carson's visible emotion during Midler's performance stands as a testament to the rare moments when television captures something genuinely moving, when even the most composed professional cannot help but respond authentically to a moment of true emotional power.
Because he is both. And he's got a new picture out right now called The Fisher King. Would you welcome Robin Williams?
Yeah.
Number 3, Robin Williams, after the death of Carson's son, 1991. In June 1991, Carson experienced a devastating personal tragedy when his son Rick was killed in a car accident. The 39-year-old Rick had been taking photographs on a winding road near Cayucos, California, when his vehicle plunged down an embankment. The loss was a profound blow to Carson, who briefly addressed it on air with characteristic restraint before continuing with his professional obligations. Johnny mentioned Rick's passing at the start of his first show back, thanking viewers for their condolences, but that was it, recalled a writer who worked on the show during this period. He didn't want to use his personal tragedy as content. That was Johnny. He believed his job was to entertain people, not to process his grief publicly. This commitment to professionalism made what happened during Robin Williams' subsequent appearance all the more powerful. Williams, known for his manic energy and rapid-fire comedy, showed a different side when he visited The Tonight Show shortly after Carson's return to the air. Robin immediately understood the situation required a different approach, explained a talent coordinator who helped prepare for the appearance. He was typically this hurricane of energy, but he came in with a completely different mindset that night. He told us backstage, "I'm not here to do my usual thing. I'm here to support Johnny." The interview began with Williams's characteristic humor, but at a noticeably more measured pace. As the segment progressed, viewers witnessed something remarkable. Williams gradually modulating his performance, creating moments of genuine connection amid the comedy. Toward the end of their conversation, Williams gently acknowledged Carson's loss without directly mentioning it, a subtle but clear message of support. It was masterfully done, remembered a director who worked that night. Robin found this perfect balance. He gave the audience the comedy they expected while creating space for genuine human connection with someone who was grieving. And Johnny, who never let his guard down, had this moment where everything just showed on his face. That moment, captured in a close-up that network cameras usually avoided during emotional displays, showed Carson's eyes visibly watering as Williams expressed, through both words and manner, his understanding of Carson's pain. It was a fleeting but powerful glimpse of genuine vulnerability from television's most controlled personality. Johnny never directly addressed what happened with Robin that night, noted a longtime associate of Carson's. But several staff members overheard him say, "Robin understood exactly what I needed tonight." It was high praise from someone who rarely commented on guests' performances. What made the moment particularly significant was how it represented a perfect meeting of two very different performative styles. Williams, known for emotional transparency and boundless energy, found a way to connect with Carson, the master of restraint and controlled affect. In that brief intersection, viewers witnessed something rarely seen on television: authentic emotional support transmitted through the artificial medium of a talk show interview. The segment is rarely shown in clip compilations, perhaps out of respect for the private nature of Carson's grief. But those who witnessed it remember it as one of the most genuinely human moments in the show's 3-decade history, a time when entertainment gave way to something more profound, and when even Johnny Carson couldn't maintain the emotional distance he typically cultivated so carefully.
That in trying to be very nice, to say a lot of things that no human being alive could live up to.
Number 4, Sammy Davis Jr., post-cancer appearance. Sammy Davis Jr. had been a Tonight Show regular throughout Carson's tenure, always bringing his characteristic energy, talent, and charisma to his appearances. The legendary entertainer had developed a warm rapport with Carson over the years, their on-air chemistry making for reliably entertaining television. But when Davis appeared on the show following treatment for throat cancer, the typical showbiz repartee gave way to something far more emotionally powerful. Everyone backstage was shocked by Sammy's appearance when he arrived, recalled a production assistant who worked that night. He had lost so much weight, and the surgery and radiation had clearly taken a tremendous toll. There were actually discussions about whether the appearance should proceed, but Sammy was adamant. He said, "The public needs to see what cancer looks like. I'm not hiding." Carson, who had been briefed about Davis's condition, was nonetheless visibly shaken when he first saw his longtime friend walk onto the stage. Though he maintained his professional demeanor, viewers could see the shock and concern in his expression as he welcomed Davis to the show. "Johnny was visibly fighting his emotions from the moment Sammy appeared," explained a camera operator who was focused on Carson during the entrance. His hands were clasped more tightly than usual, and there was this slight tremor in his voice during the introduction. For someone who prided himself on composure, these were significant tells. What made the segment particularly moving was Davis's determination to be honest about his condition, while still bringing entertainment value to the show. Despite his weakened state, he insisted on performing a brief song, his voice notably affected by the cancer treatment, but his artistic commitment unchanged. When Sammy started to sing, you could see Johnny just break a little, remembered a director who worked that night. Carson had this amazing poker face he'd developed over decades in television, but watching his friend, this incredible talent, struggle physically while still giving everything he had artistically, it cracked that facade, his eyes welled up, and he didn't even try to hide it. The emotional peak came near the end of the interview when Davis thanked Carson for never turning his back during Davis's career, acknowledging the host's long support during times when racial barriers still significantly limited opportunities for black entertainers. Carson, clearly moved, attempted to respond, but found his voice breaking. It was a rare moment of visible emotion from television's most controlled personality. "That thank you from Sammy wasn't scripted or planned," noted a segment producer. "It was a genuine expression of gratitude from one professional to another, and Johnny's reaction was equally genuine. He was truly touched by this acknowledgement from someone he deeply respected, especially given the circumstances." The power of the moment was amplified by the knowledge, shared by both men though unspoken, that this might be Davis's final appearance on the show. This unacknowledged subtext gave every exchange an additional layer of emotional weight that was palpable to viewers. After the segment, Johnny took a longer than usual commercial break, revealed a stage manager who was present. He went back to his office briefly, and when he returned, you could tell he had taken a moment to compose himself. That almost never happened. Johnny prided himself on being able to transition seamlessly between segments, regardless of content. Davis would make one more appearance on The Tonight Show before his death in 1990, but it was this post-cancer interview that most revealed the depth of friendship and respect between the two entertainment legends, and that provided viewers with a rare glimpse of Carson's emotional vulnerability beneath his carefully maintained professional exterior.
I'm one of the lucky people in the world. I found something I always wanted to do, and I have enjoyed every single minute of it.
Number 5. James Stewart, Carson's final show, phone call. As Johnny Carson's legendary 30-year run on The Tonight Show drew to a close on May 22, 1992, the final broadcast was carefully structured to provide a fitting conclusion to television's most successful late-night program. While most of the farewell show featured Carson alone on stage, reminiscing and showing highlights from previous years, there was one unscripted moment that caught the usually composed host off guard, an unexpected phone call from his longtime friend Jimmy Stewart. "The call wasn't on the rundown for the final show," explained a producer who worked on Carson's farewell broadcast. "We had specifically decided against having guests that night. Johnny wanted to speak directly to his audience without the traditional interview format. The call from Stewart was arranged very last minute, and Carson had no idea it was coming." As Carson was reflecting on his 3 decades as host, he was interrupted by a phone call. When he answered, Jimmy Stewart's instantly recognizable voice filled the studio. The surprise was evident on Carson's face as he realized who was calling to wish him farewell. "You could see Johnny's entire demeanor change the moment he heard Stewart's voice," recalled a director who was in the control room that night. "His eyes widened, and this smile spread across his face. Not his professional host smile, but this genuine expression of pleasure. These were two men with tremendous mutual respect, and that authentic connection was immediately visible." What followed was a brief but emotionally charged exchange between two American icons. Stewart, his voice showing his advanced age, but still carrying that distinctive hesitant quality, expressed his admiration for Carson's accomplishments and his personal appreciation for their friendship over the years. "Johnny was fighting for composure throughout the call," noted a camera operator who was focused on Carson during the exchange. "He kept nodding rather than speaking at certain points, which those of us who had worked with him recognized as a technique he used when he was too emotional to trust his voice. There was this moment toward the end of their conversation where he just fell silent, and that pause communicated everything about what Stewart's friendship meant to him. When Carson finally responded to Stewart's good wishes, viewers could detect the subtle but unmistakable emotion in his voice, a slight hoarseness, a barely perceptible tremor that betrayed the feelings beneath his controlled exterior. For a man who had built his career on unflappable poise, even this minor display of emotion was significant. "That call hit Johnny in a way nothing else did during the finale," remembered a longtime associate who was backstage that night. He had prepared himself emotionally for the farewell show, had reconciled himself to ending this chapter of his life. But hearing from Stewart, who represented an older generation of entertainers that Carson deeply respected, caught him off guard. It was the personal nature of it. Not a scripted segment, but a genuine moment between friends. What made the exchange particularly...
Those little lions and little baby lions were 1 year old.
That's right.
They are now treacherous and ferocious 10-year-old animals.
Number 6. Ed McMahon, Farewell Tribute, 1992. For 30 years, Ed McMahon had served as Johnny Carson's sidekick, announcer, and straight man on The Tonight Show. Their professional partnership, one of the longest and most successful in television history, had evolved into a genuine friendship that provided the foundation for thousands of broadcasts. When the time came for Carson's farewell in May 1992, McMahon's tribute to his longtime colleague created one of the most emotionally charged moments in the show's final week. Ed had been preparing what he wanted to say for weeks, revealed a producer who worked closely with McMahon during the final days of the show. He understood better than anyone the historical significance of what was ending, and he felt an enormous responsibility to find the right words to honor not just their professional partnership, but their personal friendship. The moment came during Carson's penultimate show. McMahon, departing from his usual role as the boisterous announcer, adopted a more reflective tone as he began to speak directly to Carson about their 3 decades together. As McMahon recounted memories from their early days and expressed his gratitude for their partnership, viewers witnessed something remarkable. Carson, television's master of composure, struggling to maintain his professional demeanor. Johnny was clearly not expecting the emotional weight of what Ed was saying, recalled a camera operator who was focused on Carson during McMahon's tribute. You could see him swallowing hard, blinking rapidly, all those subtle signs of someone working to keep their emotions in check. He kept nodding slightly, which was his way of acknowledging Ed's words without trusting himself to speak. What made the moment particularly powerful was watching McMahon himself becoming emotional as he spoke. The man whose booming "Here's Johnny" had opened the show for 3 decades found his own voice cracking as he thanked Carson for their friendship. This visible emotion from his longtime partner seemed to further affect Carson, whose eyes visibly filled with tears. There was this moment where their eyes met, and something passed between them that went beyond words, remembered a director who was in the control booth that night. These were 2 men who had spent more time together than most marriages last, who had created this incredible body of work as a team, and who were now acknowledging that it was coming to an end. The emotion in the studio was palpable. Carson, clearly moved but determined to maintain some semblance of his typical restraint, attempted to lighten the moment with humor. But even as he delivered a joke in response, viewers could see that the emotion remained just beneath the surface, his voice slightly less steady than usual, his timing just a beat off from his normal perfect delivery. What people at home might not have fully appreciated was how rare it was to see Johnny affected like that, explained a longtime staff writer. This was a man who prided himself on never letting his guard down professionally. To see him visibly moved, to watch him fighting to maintain composure, was to understand just how significant his relationship with Ed truly was. The power of the moment was amplified by the knowledge that this partnership, this nightly tradition that had defined American television for a generation, was coming to an end. McMahon's tribute wasn't just acknowledging their personal relationship, but marking the conclusion of a cultural institution that had shaped late-night entertainment for 3 decades. After the segment, during the commercial break, Johnny and Ed shared this brief moment together off camera, recalled a stage manager who was present. No words, just this quick handshake that turned into a half embrace. For 2 men of their generation, who came up in an era where men didn't openly display affection, it spoke volumes about what they meant to each other. In a farewell week filled with emotional moments, McMahon's tribute stands out as particularly significant, not just for the genuine feeling it displayed, but for how it revealed the depth of a partnership that had entertained millions while creating one of television's most enduring friendships.
And I love my dad and James Stewart. They were the same person in a way. And then last night we were...
Number 7, Carol Burnett, Emotional Tribute. Carol Burnett had been a Tonight Show favorite throughout Carson's tenure, her quick wit and genuine warmth making her one of the host's most welcome recurring guests. The mutual respect between these 2 television legends was evident in their easy rapport and the obvious pleasure Carson took in her appearances. When Burnett made her final visit during Carson's farewell season in 1992, what began as a typical comedy segment evolved into an unexpectedly moving tribute that caught the normally composed host off guard. Carol hadn't planned anything particularly emotional, explained a segment producer who worked on the appearance. She came prepared with her usual funny stories and the kind of comedy bits she and Johnny had perfected over the years. The emotional moment was completely spontaneous, which is why it affected Carson so deeply. The interview began conventionally, with with Burnett sharing anecdotes and engaging in the comfortable back and forth that had characterized their many previous encounters. But as the segment neared its conclusion, Burnett suddenly shifted tone, addressing Carson directly about what his support had meant to her career and expressing her personal appreciation for their friendship over the decades. "It wasn't a prepared speech. That's what made it so powerful," recalled a writer who was present that night. Carol just started speaking from the heart about Johnny's impact, not just on her career, but on American entertainment as a whole. It was this beautiful, sincere acknowledgement of his legacy, and you could see it caught him completely by surprise. As Burnett continued her impromptu tribute, cameras caught Carson's reaction, a man visibly moved, but fighting to maintain his characteristic composure. His eyes noticeably welled up as Burnett spoke about specific instances when his support had made a difference in her career, moments that Carson himself had likely never thought twice about, but that had meant everything to a fellow performer. "Johnny had this tell when he was emotional. He would clear his throat and adjust his tie," noted a camera operator who had worked with Carson for years. He did both during Carol's remarks. For anyone else, it might have seemed like nothing, but for those of us who knew Carson's typical on-air composure, it was like watching a dam about to break. What made the moment particularly touching was how it represented a public acknowledgement of a professional generosity that Carson typically extended privately. Throughout his career, Carson had used his platform to elevate comedians and performers he respected, often without drawing attention to his own role in advancing their careers. Carol was giving voice to what so many performers felt about Johnny, explained a longtime Tonight Show staff member. He had this enormous power to make or break careers, and he consistently used it to support talent he believed in, but he never took credit for it publicly. Hearing Carol acknowledge that support and watching Johnny process that recognition in real time was incredibly moving. When Burnett concluded her remarks, Carson attempted to respond with his typical light humor, but viewers could detect the emotion in his voice, a slight hoarseness, a barely perceptible tremor that betrayed the feelings beneath his controlled exterior. It was a rare glimpse of the genuine man behind the polished television persona. After the segment, Johnny took a moment in his office before the next guest, revealed a stage manager. When he came back out, he mentioned to one of the producers, "Carol got me there." Coming from Carson, who rarely acknowledged emotional displays, it was a significant admission. The Burnett tribute became one of the emotional highlights of Carson's farewell season, not because it was the most overtly tearful moment, but because it represented an authentic acknowledgement of Carson's impact from a peer he deeply respected. In a medium often criticized for artificial sentiment, this spontaneous expression of genuine appreciation created a moment of true emotional connection that even television's most composed host couldn't entirely conceal. These 7 emotional moments reveal a side of Johnny Carson that viewers rarely glimpsed during his 3 decades on air. Beneath the unflappable exterior was a man of deep feeling who occasionally found himself moved beyond his carefully maintained professional composure. In these brief instances when Carson's emotional guard dropped, audiences were offered fleeting but powerful insights into the genuine person behind the television legend. What makes these moments particularly significant is their authenticity. In an era of television increasingly defined by manufactured sentiment and calculated emotional displays, Carson's tears were never strategic or performative. They were genuine reactions that he actually tried to suppress, following the generational and personal code that viewed public emotion as something to be controlled rather than indulged. This tension between Carson's genuine feelings and his professional determination to maintain composure adds a poignant dimension to each of these moments. Viewers weren't just witnessing emotional displays. They were watching a normally controlled personality struggling with the unexpected power of his own reactions. These weren't tears shed easily or for effect. They were emotions so genuine they breached Carson's considerable defenses. Perhaps most telling is what moved Carson to these rare displays. Tributes from respected colleagues, acknowledgments of deep friendship, artistic expressions that touched on universal human experiences of loss and connection. Unlike many television personalities who might be moved by calculated tearjerkers, Carson responded to authentic human moments that recognized the value of genuine relationships and honest emotional expression.